Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So if you've been following this series, you'll have noticed that it's been full of fits and starts and interruptions and go-backs and do-overs, reassessment and then rework basically in light of things I've discovered along the way. Now you might remember that I did an intermission episode a while back. I think it was episode 5, where I took a moment to pull back from this build and remind myself of the overall concept, what I'm shooting for in the end. At that stage, I had only worked on the neck and the body was just a 3D model in my design software, which is Rhino. So I took a pause and zoomed out a bit and revisited the base that's been the inspiration for this build, which is this 1991 modulus 6-string you see here. Now at this point in the current build, I'm much further along in the process than my last intermission video, but the other day, for some reason I felt it might be good to take another intermission and just evaluate where I'm at. So what I did was I just took the various parts and pieces in whatever stage of completion and actually assembled the base. And I'm really glad that I did for reasons I'll explain in the following scenes. So here it is, the base at this stage in the build. It's just tacked together at the moment. The nut is being held on by double-sided tape. The bridge is only partially screwed in. The strings are mismatched and old and grungy. But at this stage, a lot of the difficult and time-consuming work is actually complete, despite any appearances to the contrary. I've done pretty much all of the fretwork, which I'll be showing you in an upcoming video. The body is mostly finished, except for the remaining finish, of course. The neck, other than the fretboard, is still raw wood, as you can see. And of course, I've done nothing yet in terms of electronics, beyond just doing a preliminary installation of the pickup to see how it feels under my fingers. So for the most part, I'm verging on the finishing and then setup and adjustment phases. But as I mentioned, I'm really glad I took this intermission and put the base together just to see how it feels. And also to suss out any adjustments I might need to make before proceeding to the final steps, at which point it might be too late to make certain adjustments, or making them would involve a ton more rework, for example, stripping away finish to remove some more wood or something along those lines. So what I'd like to do now is talk about what seems to be going well so far, what seems to be working, and then discuss some things I definitely need to change before progressing further in this build. Okay, so let's start with the good in no particular order. The first thing is that I've once again managed to build a fairly straight neck and a very flat and level fretboard. I mean, this thing right now is a bit of a mess in terms of its setup, beginning with the nut, which is sitting way too high in relation to the fretboard. But nonetheless, right out of the gate, the action is pretty decent and the neck is very flat. If I do the string test right now, I can tell that under tension, this neck might need a quarter turn or a half turn adjustment to the truss rod at most to be dead flat, and that's pretty good. I also noticed that the intonation is already pretty close without having made any adjustments yet. So the most important things, action and intonation, seem to be largely in place, which is good news. As it stands, I probably won't need to do much in terms of final adjustments to the neck and the bridge. Okay, so the next thing that's obvious to me is the weight. I've been saying throughout this series that one of my goals for this build is to end up with the base somewhere around 8 pounds total weight, as opposed to the 10, 11, or even 12 pounds total weight of many production bases. Now, when I first bolted the neck to the body, when the only hardware included was the tuners, it weighed less than 7 pounds. At this point, with nearly all the hardware on it and strings, it weighs about 8.3 pounds. What's been really surprising to me is just how much weight the hardware adds, which is something I need to consider moving forward. That said, though, I'm pretty surprised that the body and the neck, without the tuners, only weigh about 6.25 pounds. And again, that comes down to a couple things. Choosing basswood for the body core and making the body about 35 millimeters thick rather than the standard thickness of 40 to 45 millimeters, let's say. Those things together probably save me about 2 pounds in total weight. Finally, and this is the really important thing for me, my choice of pickup, and more crucially, pickup placement. These things seem to be making a huge difference both in terms of playability and tone. When I play this thing on the pickup, which probably puts my fingers 10 to 20 millimeters farther from the bridge than most setups I have in my other basses, the difference is quite noticeable. I mean, at this point, I'm just playing it acoustically, but the difference in tone and tension is pretty significant. It's just a lot easier to play, first of all, and the tone of the string is much warmer versus closer to the bridge. So those are the main positives right now, but we still have to talk about the negatives. And here's where my choice to call a second intermission is hopefully going to pay off. So now, on to the bad, or at the very least, the suboptimal. For starters, I've discovered, much to my disappointment, that the recess I carved for the bridge is not deep enough. That is, it leaves the bridge sitting too high off the body to lower the strings as far as I'd like. I said in the last segment that the action on this bass is pretty nice, and it is, but at the moment, many of the saddles on the bridge are as low as they'll go. In other words, I have no adjustability left in terms of lowering the action, and that's just completely unacceptable on a bass that's designed to have the lowest action achievable, at least by me. Now, ironically, my favorite instrument builder on YouTube, and that's Chris at Highline Guitars, recently ran into a similar problem with his very cool crocodile guitar build. He didn't carve the pocket deep enough for the hardtail bridge he chose, so he had to make some adjustments to get the kind of action he was after. In his case, he simply sanded the base plate of the bridge to reduce its height off the body. But I'm not really going to be able to do that. So what I have to do is take a router template, line it up perfectly with the existing cavity, and then route a couple more millimeters of depth. I'm not going to lie, it's going to suck and be extremely nerve-wracking. And I know this because I've had to do it before on another bass body that I built. Luckily, I have a good template and a pretty decent method for securing the template to the body. But the operation is going to be very tricky because I'm already dealing with a very shallow depth, and most router bits aren't really designed for what I'll be trying to do. It'll be stressful, and I'll need to get the setup right, or I'll get a really lousy result. Okay, second, and this is a big problem as well, I'm still not happy with the profile of the neck, even after adjusting the design of my 3D model to make the neck thinner and more along the lines of my favorite bass neck, the Ibanez SR6. Now, I'm pretty sure I know where I went wrong, and that was in making the fretboard too thick by about 1.5 millimeters. The neck shaft itself is probably about where I want it in terms of its shape and thickness, but by leaving the fretboard thicker than I should have, I basically altered the overall shape and thickness of the neck and counteracted the changes I had made to the neck shaft profile. Now, I'm talking about 1 millimeter's difference this way or that, which might not seem like much, but it is. There's no escaping that there are just certain things your hands know, and this is definitely one of them. So now I have a decision to make. To be honest, the shape and thickness of the neck right now are fine. They're comparable to other basses I own, but just like with the depth of the bridge and the action, I have to ask myself whether I'll be happy with a bass whose neck doesn't feel optimal to me. If I choose to do something about it, that's going to mean breaking out the hand tools and trying to thin the neck profile by hand, which will be a tall order and probably compromise the accuracy and straightness of the neck as carved by the CNC machine. At the same time, given that I'll be focusing on just a thin section of the neck shaft while avoiding the back and the perimeter, it probably wouldn't affect much aesthetically, but that is a decision I still need to make. Okay, some final thoughts for this episode. As I've said a couple times now, I am super glad that I opted for the second intermission and just put the bass together as is. Doing so has allowed me to finally get a sense of what this thing is going to feel like when it's finished, and most importantly, how it's going to play. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few really encouraging signs for how this instrument will ultimately turn out. Despite the issue I mentioned with the depth of the bridge, the action is pretty good, the neck is flat under string tension, and it looks to be well within its range of adjustability, which is great. In addition, the pickup placement feels spot on at this point. I don't know yet what kind of tone I'll get when the electronics are wired up and I'm playing amplified, but I can definitely tell just by playing the instrument acoustically that the placement of this pickup is going to make a big difference versus other basses that I own. First of all, the reduction in tension is going to make the higher strings much easier to play and give me better articulation, especially on the C string. At the same time, the tone will be a lot rounder and less raspy on the higher strings, which is a big deal for me because I spend a lot of the time way up the neck on those strings, whether soloing or playing chordal parts. By the same token, I'm really glad I took this intermission because it's allowed me to identify a couple things that are easier to fix now before I move on to the final stages of the build. For example, the issue with the neck profile. Now, if I had gone ahead and finished the neck as initially planned, then I'd be staring at the same issue, but with several layers of epoxy on top of it. At that stage, I'm thinking I'd be less likely to address the issue and probably just decide to live with it, especially considering all the effort I would have put in to finish the neck. But now at least I have the option to consider doing something about it. Similarly, and I think this is very important as well, taking this intermission has restored some of my enthusiasm for this product. One thing I've learned so far while trying to build instruments is that there are long periods in the process, at least for me, that are kind of a slog. Like very repetitive and slow work focused on a single component like the frets or level sanding the body. It's difficult sometimes to feel any sense of progress when you're mired in these slow, time-consuming processes. Like often I feel I'm just sitting here staring at the same piece of the instrument, be it the body, the neck, or the fretboard, and it just doesn't feel like I'm getting anywhere. All I see in moments like that is all the work I have left to do before the instrument is completely finished. So for someone like me who's relatively new to this, taking a moment to see where all this is headed is a real boost psychologically. And not coincidentally, it's a real boost to physically play the instrument for the first time. Even in this ad hoc state with the thing barely tacked together, I can sense how well it's going to play once I iron out the remaining kinks and finish the process, including the final setup. In any case, that's where things stand right now. I will be disassembling this bass soon and getting back to work on it. As I mentioned, I have a backlog of footage that I still need to share with you. The next episodes will involve installing the frets and doing all the fret work. Somewhere in the meantime, I'll probably make the adjustments I've discussed in this episode. But for now, thanks for joining me in the second intermission, and I look forward to seeing you next time.